Hello, this is the Ancient History lecture for Friday, the 18th of September, 2020. Where we left things off, we had covered Christianity as a vital force of history, leaving the Middle East and becoming European. We discussed the rise of Islam, its zenith 1,000 years ago, and the traumatic head wound that it suffered as a result of the Mongol conquests that destroyed the eastern third of Islam's cities and began a series of de-intellectualizations that has rendered to this day the Arab or Islamic world intellectually in many ways second rate. Not because there's anything wrong with the Arabs, and certainly not because Arab Islamic culture has something fundamentally wrong with it, but because since the Mongol conquests of the 1200s, there is a fundamentalist tendency within Islamic societies to judge everything by the standards of Muhammad's words and the Quran, with the result being that since that time, even scholars positing ideas, even creative people suggesting notions, would cause the fundamentalists to say, you're not being enough like Muhammad, you're not being Quranic, therefore you're satanic and we should destroy you. In an environment of threat like that, the kind of freewheeling brainstorming necessary for human creativity simply cannot happen. And as a result, there has been a real problem with spooling up intellectual life in the Islamic world because of the constant fear of fundamentalist violence, of Muslim on Muslim violence. Now we come to the story of the Jews of the diaspora. Remember, diaspora means the dispersion of the Jews, which Hadrian did when he tossed the Jews out of anywhere near Jerusalem. They were to live as strangers in a strange land, and they lived as minority populations in the Middle East, but especially in Europe. Now, people moving to other countries and assimilating, that's normal. Heck, we're a nation of immigrants. Send us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Thus speaks Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty. We're a nation of immigrants. Even natives immigrated here from Eurasia 10,000 years ago across a land bridge. And when people come to America, they expect, for the most part, and we expect, that they will learn English, learn to fit in, and bring something new to our society. But we expect them not to live as isolated, ghettoized populations like they lived in the old country. We expect them, and their children especially, to become Americanized. That's true of any society that accepts people from outside joining them. The expectation is that to a great degree, the Issei, which is a Japanese term for the first generation of immigrants, will try their best to assimilate. But the Nisei, those children of immigrants born in this country, will grow up acculturated to whatever society they happen to be living in. However, there's a problem with this. And I'll illustrate the problem by talking about the people who ended up founding the Plymouth Bay colony and having our first Thanksgiving. The Puritans were Reformed Christians who weren't comfortable in 1600s England, which was dominated by the official Church of England, which had many Catholic holdovers. It wasn't Catholic anymore, but it had many Catholic holdovers. The Puritans were so serious about their faith that that a group of them, the Pilgrims, left England to go to the only Reformed Christian country in Europe, Holland. Holland religiously was very, very harmonious with the Pilgrims. But after a while, the Pilgrims noticed that their children started speaking Dutch more fluently than English, and they started wearing the wooden shoes. In other words, what the Pilgrims saw was that their children were going to grow up Dutch, and that what made them English would disappear. And they tried to find an option that would allow them to keep their Reformed Christian faith while at the same time keeping their English culture. And they found it in the wilderness. They planned to go to the wilderness of North America. They expected to go to Virginia and build their God's new Israel. But their ship went off course and they ended up north of Virginia in Massachusetts, what is today Massachusetts. And at Plymouth Rock, they land and they established the Mayflower Compact. Now, we can go on with that story. It's a wonderful story, and I probably will at Thanksgiving talk about the real story of Thanksgiving, which involves an escape from socialism, Christian socialism. We'll talk about that. You can look forward to it. But the key is the feeling that those pilgrims had while in Holland, that the children would grow up foreigners from their English perspective, even though they were the ones living in Holland. Well, the Jews had a similar problem. They did not want to give up their essential Judaic nature. They did not want to give up their faith in the Lord God Almighty. This is what made the Jewish people. This is what still makes the Jewish people. Their unique emphasis on faith as the definitive fact of their lives and of their culture. But when you have Jews living in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in England, in Poland, and elsewhere, the natural process of acculturation and assimilation says that the Ise, the initial immigrants, will only be partially adapted to the new society. But the Nisei, the second generation, to use that Japanese term, they're going to grow up much more assimilated to the culture that surrounds them than in any relation to what the old country was like, what the old culture was like. And the Jews were very, very, very careful about this. Now, there are many different types of Jewish faith, just like there are many denominations of Christianity, and there are many types of Islam. Most great religions have subgroups within them that don't necessarily agree about everything. But for the most part, Jews kept themselves isolated, either by their own choice, living in their own neighborhood, with other Jews surrounding them, like Little Italy or Chinatown, but it's the Jewish neighborhood. Sometimes, though, it wasn't their choice. Sometimes the people who they were living among said, you Jews should live together, keep each other company as neighbors, and not bother us. But it wasn't just that Jews chose to, very often, keep themselves as a people apart in terms of where they lived. It was uncomfortable if a Jewish girl was dating a non-Jewish guy. See, in traditional Judaism, the faith and the identity are passed through the mother. Now, that's strange to us from a patriarchal system, where we carry usually our father's name and our father's identity. But there's always a theoretical question, at least, of who the father of a child is. However, there's no question about who a child's mother is for obvious reasons. So Jewish women pass on the faith to their children, both in terms of their identity as Jews and in terms of being mothers who raise their kids to be good Jewish people. If a Jewish girl marries a Gentile man, that's all put at risk. Maybe the Gentile family will insist, and maybe the couple will decide not to raise their kids Jewish. And so the Jewish people lose population at a time when they really can't, because they're already a tiny minority amidst a sea of non-Jewish people. Now, it's pretty personal when your son isn't good enough to date their daughter because he's not Jewish. This offends people. Remember, I have said, to be an individual is in some ways to be indecent because you shock the sensibilities of the conformists around you. So this is something that shocks the sense of sensibilities. Here I am, a Parisian living in Paris. I got a great son. He meets a great girl. She happens to be Jewish. But they're against the marriage, and the marriage probably won't happen because she is too good for my son. that builds a visceral anger. But there's more. Not only do Jews tend to live together, Not only do they tend to resist intensely strongly the intermarriage of their children, particularly their daughters, to Gentile families, Jews keep themselves apart in other ways. Traditional Jews, Orthodox Jews, and Hasidim, even today, dress in a particular way: black and white clothing, Amish style flat hat, and the forelocks. Young Jewish men are not supposed to, if they're Orthodox or Hasidic, cut the hair right here, and so it grows in these curls, and a traditional Jew is going to have curls up down to here by the time he's an older man. That sets them apart visually. Oh, look, there are a couple of Jews. You can just spot them by the way they dress. But that's not all. There's something insidious and deeply subconscious about the sense of smell. The human sense of smell is not something that is primarily wired into our conscious minds. That's why it's so hard to describe smells in words, whereas it's much easier to describe things that we see in words. Our eyesight is plugged much more into our ego, our conscious mind. But the subconscious is where the sense of scent really, really lands. So you can be walking down the street, minding your own business, age 35, and suddenly catch a whiff of somebody's apple pie cooking in the kitchen somewhere, and suddenly you're back with your grandma and she's taking an apple pie out of the oven. Scent has that ability to evoke memory and primal emotions. Jews keep kosher. What that means is they do not eat the typical standard food that the people in their host countries eat. Now, today, most of us bathe or shower daily or several times a week. We have colognes and perfumes and scented shampoos and scented soaps, and we want people to be clean, scrubbed, nice, and clean. We do not want to smell the odeur of the human body as we go about our daily business. And our technology level allows us to achieve this level of cleanliness, of squeaky cleanness. But this was not the case in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, people lived in cities cheek by jowl without bathing regularly. Maybe they had a bath once every week or two, if they were lucky, and if they were in a society that did bathing frequently. And the bath that they had was a sponge bath. It wasn't a full immersion bath, and it certainly wasn't a shower. So, in an environment like that, the body odor that various people have was part of life. City air may stink on ice, but city air is free air. You're going to hear me say that again and again, because city air is the air of a place that's industrious. You've got the smell of horse glue factories. You got the smell of coal smoke. You got the smell of thousands of unwashed bodies in high summer. You got all of the animal waste and droppings that are throughout the city. You got the smell of rats, the living, the dead, the sick, the fish market, the meat market. Everything reeks. But the city's the only place where a person can make their own way without reference really to who their daddy was. So city air may stink, but it's free air. Well, people smell one another. And what you eat determines your body chemistry and therefore determines your body odor. Now, if your nose is used to a smell, it's not a big deal. And if it's used to a bunch of Germans who eat a lot of sauerkraut and sausage, or a bunch of Frenchmen that eat a lot of cheese and drink a lot of wine, or Englishmen that eat pot noodle, I don't know. In any event, and suddenly you come across people who eat kosher food, and only kosher food, and use a variant of different spices. Not only are they going to perhaps look different because they dress differently, not only are they going to sound different and keep to themselves and be all clannish, but they're going to smell different. And that smell is going to provoke visceral, basic reactions. This is a true story. I smoked for 23 years. And when I smoked Camel unfiltered cigarettes, Turkish blend, rich tobacco. I loved smoking and I miss it, but it was damn unhealthy, so I stopped. But when I stopped smoking, a couple of years after I stopped smoking, a sense of smell that I had battered into non-existence with tobacco use came back. And to my horror, To my horror, I discovered that most smells smell bad, at least to me. I mean, there's the smell of my wife's spaghetti sauce. That smells good. But most new smells, for whatever reason, since I quit smoking, don't necessarily smell good. Different smells, smells that you're not used to, can be shocking. What's that? Ugh. Well, that is the way people began to react to Jews, because the body chemistry was different. So now what? Well, you add one other factor in. The church has an idea of various kinds of sin. And one of the sins that the medieval church talks about as being a real problem is usury. And usury is lending money at interest. If I need money and you've got money, I'll borrow that money from you if you're willing to lend it to me, and I'll pay it back. That's lending money, that's charity, that's helping somebody out. But a banker would never do that because there's no profit in it. And the whole point of being a banker is to make a profit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's their job. The problem is Christians couldn't do much banking in the Middle Ages, because the way a banker is going to make money by loaning money to people is by loaning money at interest. So if I borrow $1,000 from you and I pay you back over a series of installments, $100 a month for the next 10 months, it's going to be $150 a month for the next 10 months, or it's going to be $100 a month for the next 12 or 13 months. In any case, eventually, for the loan of the $1,000, I am paying you back between $1,200, $1,300, and $1,500, depending upon the terms we agree upon. That is called lending money at interest, and it is the basis of all banking. But Christians can't do it in the Middle Ages because the church says that is the mortal sin of usury. And a mortal sin, go to hell, go directly to hell, do not pass go, do not collect $200 unless you atone, unless you reform, unless you are forgiven by God. And you don't want to do mortal sins a lot because that means you're not really sorry. You can't be a professional banker if you're a Christian, but do you know who could? Jewish people. Because Jewish people were not under the Christian laws in the same way, and therefore, if a Jew lends money at interest, it's not usury, it's just normal business practice. Now, why does this matter? It matters because, unfortunately, people are perverse in their natures. You would think that if you got a loan from somebody, you'd be grateful. But in fact, people tend to resent the hand that feeds them. They tend to bite the hand that feeds them. Oh, I've got to go to that Jewish banker again, hat in hand, and practically beg him for money. And he's going to ask me all sorts of questions about paying it back, and then he's going to charge me more. He's going to charge me interest, and it's going to be painful. Oh, I don't like it. Well, without that Jewish banker, you'd get nothing. But that is forgotten in the petty darkness of many human hearts. So Jews end up being resented because they keep themselves apart, because they eat different foods, because they don't let their daughters marry sons, and because they loan money and interest. Oh, and one more thing. Jews also value education as a community more strongly than most of the people around them. With that emphasis on forcing and pressurizing your kids to learn and achieve and become successful and become skilled, Jews tend to rise higher and faster in society than Gentiles. There are individual exceptions, of course, but the tendency is, oh, those Jews, they have it so good. They have better jobs than the average Frenchman or the average German or whatever. Yeah, if they do, it's because they work harder. But it's much easier, if you're feeling lousy about yourself, to engage in a little bit of sophistry, in a little bit of self-delusion. Oh, I didn't get hired, and I'm angry. And obviously, the reason I didn't get hired is not because I was less qualified than that Jewish fellow that got the job. Obviously, it was because he was Jewish and I was not, and they're all in it together in a conspiracy to rule the world. This is anti-Semitism, vocab word, and it's important that you understand. Anti-Semitism is an irrational hatred of the Jews. Because the Jews keep themselves apart, which they need to do to preserve their identity. They provoke, and I'm not saying it's the Jews' fault, I'm explaining the causal logic of this. Moral responsibility for evil is always with the evildoer. But because the Jews lived as a people apart, within the communities of other nations, they provoked notice, resentment, resistance, and envy. And ultimately, those things lead to hatred, and hatred leads to suffering. Sorry, my Yoda ears should go out. Well, it's true. The anti-Semitism that many Europeans felt resulted in an ongoing, thoroughgoing European attitude that is anti-Jewish, even while they welcome Jews and the services that Jews could uniquely provide into their communities. The great philosopher of the Holocaust, Raoul Hilberg, once said that all anti-Semitism can be divided into three simple statements. You shall not live as one of us. Your family could have been here for 1,000 years, but you're not French. You're not German. Your family could have been in this town hundreds of years before mine, but I'm a local and you'll never be. You may not live as one of us. You're always a Jew. You're always foreign. You're always alien. The second statement of anti-Semitism, after you may not live as one of us, is you may not live among us. You're not allowed to have homes near us, to work near us. You have to live in your own separate walled-off area, a little prison inside of our city. We'll benefit from your services, but we don't want you around otherwise. Better be in the walls before dark. Of course, the third statement that's going to come is obvious. Next time, Monday, we will talk about you shall not live as one of us, then you shall not live among us, and then you shall not live. Remember, one paragraph in response to this and anything else I post with it, and I'll see you Monday, God willing, or Tuesday.